Hey guys, I'm here with another video, and I'm seeing that people are watching some of my content, and I feel that I kind of need to give an idea of what my content's about. Some of it is scripted and researched content, like I did with my Tulsi video about how the left is trying to minimize her. And then I also do videos which are just hot takes and quick rants about news items I see of the day. And I see, like I said, I see people watching, and I appreciate that. And if you enjoy my content, please like it, comment. I'm happy to engage, and share the videos and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep going. So anyways, the last video I talked about Tulsi Gabbard and how the mainstream left, especially the media, is trying to minimize her and smear her and basically pull her out of the race. And I posit that it's because they fear her. And the reason why they fear her is because she's not an establishment Democrat. She's not a corporate Democrat. She's not a special interest Democrat. She is kind of counter to the Democrats that are in power right now. Now, I would never vote for Tulsi Gabbard because her politics are not my own, but I do find her legitimately convicted on her positions, and I find her as an honest politician, which is super refreshing, and I would welcome her to go against Donald Trump. It would mean that we might actually get someone who's honest in the White House. Now, you would think, well, Bernie was so popular, but the DNC really gave Bernie the shaft. And Tulsi Gabbard is a young, minority, attractive, military veteran version of Bernie, and that, I think, scares the mainstream left, the establishment left, including the media, as they're trying to smear her, minimize her, and essentially run her out of the race, is because they fear her. And to be honest, if Bernie had gone up against Trump, Bernie would have carried the Rust states, which I believe is what carried Trump. So Tulsi was on MSNBC's Morning Joe, I believe yesterday or the day before, and they were confronting her about Assad. And so I kind of want to watch this and kind of opine as this interview goes on. So,
if we are serious about the pursuit of peace,
do you think Assad is our enemy?
Assad is not the enemy of the United States because Syria does not pose a direct threat to the United States.
What do you say to Democratic voters who watched you go over there, and what do you say to military members who have been deployed repeatedly in Syria?
You know, and the interesting thing is that Tulsi is correct. Assad is not an enemy. And Tulsi is a major, I believe, in the army. So she has a different perspective than these leftist progressive journalists who live in their little protective bubble. Assad is not a direct enemy. Like, he's not going to strike, one of our coastal cities. He's, is Kentucky, as I saw someone on Twitter, is Kentucky threatened by Assad? No, and I don't even really think Assad threatens any of our interests in in Europe or the Middle East. If anything, Russia deciding to back Assad is troubling, but I don't see Assad himself as being an enemy. I mean, and you can be a terrible person, not an enemy, which Tulsi has been very adamant that Assad is a terrible dictator.
Pushing back against Assad.
People who have been deployed to Syria have been there focused on their mission, which has been to defeat ISIS. Our troops have not gone to Syria to wage yet another costly, destructive regime change war. And many troops I hear from express frustration at the fact that our country continues to wage senseless, costly regime change wars, followed by nation-building missions, leading to situations like we see in Afghanistan. So many examples of our troops being deployed, their lives put on the line, without understanding what the clear mission or objective is and how that mission actually serves the security of the American people in the United States.
And she's, again, correct in this because Tulsi has been very anti-war for a long time, and intervention as a whole has been something she's been against, right? And granted, she had mentioned that if it was true that he was committing crimes against his people, then he needs to be held accountable for that. But we don't need, boots on the ground. We don't need regime change. I mean, America is war weary. We are fatigued of war, and she understands that. And people out there in the Middle East that are servicemen understand that. And so she's saying that going to war with Syria, calling him an enemy implies that we want to do regime change. And you could argue that, maybe it does or doesn't. But Americans are war weary. We don't want regime change wars. And she has been solid in that position for a very long time, as far back as I can see.
Which I think a lot of Americans would agree with you there. But again, going back to Assad is not an enemy. Is he an adversary of the United States?
We have to look to who poses a threat to the United States and the American
I understand that, but there are a lot of people who don't pose a direct military threat to the United States who consider themselves to be adversaries of the United States.
Mika there with her arms crossed. The body language is just disgusting. But anyways, so calling Assad an adversary, is not... It's just kind of moving the goalpost of the same thing. I mean, you're kind of saying the same thing. So, I mean, you have, for example, Saudi Arabia. The government there is oppressive. I mean, talking bad about a journalist criticizing the government can face jail time. Homosexuality is a criminal crime. It's an oppressive regime, but we don't consider them an enemy, and we don't really consider them an adversary. So this is kind of still a dumb argument. And an adversary in what? Are we talking politically or militarily? And I think Tulsi kind of flubbed up on this, but I think she's trying to ask that question here.
Vladimir Putin poses or considers America to be an enemy. We consider Russia to be an adversary. I'm just asking, do you consider Assad to be an adversary of the United States?
When I look at whether it's Syria or Turkey or Russia or China or other countries in the world, I look at what are their interests, and are their interests counter to our interests.
So what would you say he is?
So exactly, that's what I was saying. And what is their interest? Russia, are they an adversary? Well, yeah, because they're against the whole NATO armament of Eastern Europe, which we spearhead and we mostly fund. And then you have China, which is definitely an economic adversary. I keep having problems with that word for some reason. So you have China, who is an economic adversary. So it just depends. What would Assad be an adversary of? I don't know. I mean, what has he done against the United States? What is his policies against the United States? I mean, when we interfered in his civil war, I guess that made him an adversary simply because we're getting involved in their affairs. Now, granted, the civil war had opened up ISIS, which was that ISIS is truly an enemy of the U.S. So that's that has to be taken into account in this.
To the United States, if you cannot say that he's an adversary or an enemy, what is Assad to the U.S.? What is the word?
You can describe it however you want to describe it.
I want to know how you describe it.
My point is that whether it is Syria or any of these other countries, we need to look at how their interests are counter to or aligned with ours.
Are Assad's interests aligned with ours?
What are Assad's interests?
Exactly the key point here. What is his interests against the United States that would make him an adversary? So she's trying to, she's trying to worm the meaning of what they're asking out of them, and they're not really working with her on this. They're just being they're trying their hardest to make her look bad in this conversation. Now, granted, when they said, "What do you think he is?" she should have just said, "Well, he's a terrible dictator, who harms his own people." That would have been good enough. But that doesn't necessarily make him an adversary either. Again, there's countries in Africa that do terrible things to their people, and they're not really adversaries. You have, again, like Saudi Arabia, not really an adversary. But then you have Iran, who is at least an adversary of the United States, because they literally say death to the USA. They literally threaten our interests in the region. So they are definitely at least an adversary. Whereas Assad, there needs to be proof in the pudding, if you will, if you're going to call him an enemy or an adversary.
Assad seems interested in the slaughter primarily of his own people, in part. I mean, how does that line up?
So, how does that affect the U.S.? I mean, to be honest, yes, is it terrible? Sure. But how does that affect the U.S. and the U.S. interests? it really doesn't. I mean, it does create a refugee crisis, which can affect, the U.S.'s interests. But how does him being a terrible dictator affect our interests? Unless he's plotting to attack the United States, unless he's plotting to attack our interests in the area. Again, so if you're applying he's an adversary, geez Louise, that he's an adversary to the United States simply because he's, kills his own people, then that implies that we need to go in, we need to do something about it, we need to regime change, which is something Tulsi Gabbard is completely against. She's tired of us being the world police. I think most Americans are tired of being the world police.
Survival, yeah.
So, and that's the end of the clip. So it's obvious that the media is just kind of dogpiling on Tulsi, trying to twist everything that she says, right? Great. They obviously don't like her. Obviously, they want to minimize her. They want to take her out of the race because they fear her. Although she's probably the best chance they have of beating Trump. And they don't realize this. They're shooting themselves in the foot by attacking Tulsi. And you could say, well, maybe they're just trying to challenge her to get strict views and black and white answers. Well, then you get Soledad O'Brien, who has this lovely tweet. Solid pushback by Joe and Mika in this interview. Is it Mika? I think it's Mika. At Tulsi Gabbard will not only have a failed presidential run, she's also going to lose her congressional seat, is my prediction. This right here is a very aggressive tweet. It's very obvious they do not like her. And Soledad O'Brien is very, very progressive, left-wing journalist and whatnot. So it's obvious that the media is literally attacking her. This is a veiled response that the media does not, or veiled evidence that the media does not like Tulsi. Tulsi, if you ever watch this, and I doubt you will, but if you ever do, don't trust the media, right? Fight back against the media. Pull a Trump card. They went after Trump just like they're going after you, and he beat the media. He beat them to a pulp. You can do the same thing. Don't kowtow. Don't bow to these media elites who are going to push you into saying something you don't want to say just to quote-unquote win votes. The fact that you are saying what you are saying now and that you are being the person you are now is the reason why a lot of people like you and a lot of people want you to run. A lot of people want you to win. A lot of people want you to defeat Trump. And again, like I said, I'm never going to vote for Tulsi, but I really do like her, and I really do think she is an honest candidate, and I would love to see somebody run who's not covered by the special interests, who are not corporatists, who are not establishment Democrats run against Donald Trump. I would love to see that. It would be very refreshing. So anyways, if you have a different opinion, leave a comment below. I would definitely recommend checking out my previous video about Tulsi. It kind of goes over the whole... actually, you know what? Before I even leave, I do want to mention the other piece of evidence is the fact that NBC's it was NBC, I believe, posted the article that Russian bots are trying to drum up support for Tulsi Gabbard, and Glenn Greenwald, and I covered this in my previous video, but Glenn Greenwald had said that no, the people who are behind this Russian botnet are not Russians, and they purposely make it look like it's Russians. And NBC was kind of caught with their pants down, and the author, who is an I believe he's ex-BuzzFeed, or no, he's ex-Gawker. This is the same guy who got really angry that someone told him to learn to code recently. Bob, I can't remember his name now, but anyways, the guy who wrote that article is like trying to explain away what Glenn Greenwald had found out, and it's one of those situations where the more complex the excuse is, the higher chances that it's a false excuse, and that's what it looks like now. So the media is perpetuating this whole Tulsi Gabbard is being supported by Russia thing. Russia is now their ultimate trap card. It is their ace in the hole, their ace up their sleeve thing, and they've whipped it out already for Tulsi very, very early on. So it's obvious that the media has it out for Tulsi, and they want to destroy her. And for someone who's not voting for her, I find myself having to constantly defend her. So, but anyways, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. I am totally happy to engage if you disagree, or if you side with Tulsi, whatever it is. I love to keep the conversation going. So anyways, thanks guys.